Hey, what's good, guys? My name's Chris. Welcome back to the official WearTesters.com YouTube channel. Today we got something a little bit different, possibly even something a little bit special. We have a friend of mine. We are Instagram friends. His name is Jay. You guys might know him as Shanghai Soul. And then we have a longtime friend of mine from the Bay Area. His name is Jason. He has worked with WearTesters on and off throughout the years, and he is back here. He lives in China now, and we are going to talk about basically what it's like being a sneakerhead in China, which is vastly different than what most of us are used to here in the States. Just buying Jordans alone is like a crazy difference, and most of us, it's like hard for us to fathom how simple it is over there. Something that I'm a little bit jealous about. But Jason, go ahead and introduce yourself real quick, just so that everybody will kind of get to know you real quick, and then we'll move on to Jay.
Sure, sounds good. As Chris mentioned, my name is Jason. I'm originally from the Bay Area, currently living out in China. Some of you may know me from a few of my videos, a few of my articles. So I've done a little bit of work with WearTesters, and just really excited to be here today and being able to chop it up with Jay as well as you, Chris. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to kind of talk about it and kind of let the viewers know a little bit more about sneakerheads in China and just kind of the shoe game here in general. So I think it's going to be a great conversation.
Where in China are you, by the way?
So I'm in Shenzhen, which is like near Hong Kong. It's like right across the water. So kind of located down in the southern part.
Okay. Jay, go ahead and introduce yourself just in case anybody is unaware of who you are. Also, what part of China are you guys in? Because I know you're close, but not in the same vicinity.
So what's up, everybody? My name is Jay, Instagram Shanghai Soul. You may know me from my posts on IG about sneaker sitting. Been on a couple podcasts as well, but first time chopping it up with Chris and Jason. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I'm in Shanghai right now, hence the name Shanghai Soul. I don't know what's going to happen when I move. That's going to be a big problem.
Oh, no.
Yeah, in Shanghai. Yeah, in Shanghai for 11 years now, and big sneakerhead was in the States, and it's really interesting how it's different over in China.
So this whole, like concept or whatever, the idea behind this particular video was actually Jason's idea. So I do want to kind of give him the point guard position, if you will, and let him run things. I'm going to be here just to chime in. If you have any specific questions geared towards either of us, feel free to just be like, hey, Chris or Jay. And I'm sure I'm going to pop in with like ideas and really good tangents, hopefully, that aren't too far off of topic. So go ahead and tell us where we're going to start.
Yeah, so I think if we just look at Jay's background, we can kind of see a lot of Jordans there on the wall. That's not really what a Jordan store looks like in the US. And Jay, you mentioned you've kind of got a little bit of Instagram fame just kind of from some of your photos detailing what a Jordan store looks like in China. So I think we can start there. And Jay, why don't you start breaking it down, just kind of when you started noticing this, why you started taking the photos, putting them online, and just kind of some of the trends that you've been noticing with Jordan brand in China.
I've always taken photos like this on my Instagram page just because at heart, I'm American. So I know that most of my following on IG is from the States, North America. Even when shoes weren't sitting here, people were always really curious as to like what the stores look like. How are they different? What are we carrying? It started off with a lot of Chinese New Year exclusive stuff or like China exclusives, because those typically don't do well in China. They fly in the States. They're super limited in the States. Sometimes they don't even drop there. I think the very first photo I took was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It was kind of like the Taxi 12s. They were the Chinese New Year 12s, but they were the 3M upper. And instead of like the fake gold, it was bamboo on the side. And the Singles Day Jordans, every year in November, that's 11/11 for people in North America that don't know. That's like one of the biggest shopping days. It's like Black Friday for China. Those shoes have always typically sat here, and I've actually helped a couple friends in the States cop them. I took photos, and it was interesting that some of the comments I was getting, it was just like, whoa, I can't believe those are sitting. And this is pre-COVID. And I want to say that, and I don't know, Jason, if you agree, but I think pre-COVID reselling was bigger here than it was in North America. It was harder to get shoes here than it is in the States. I know, Chris, you might be like, that's impossible. Like the States is messed up right now with resellers.
Well, is that Jordan product or all product?
I think all product, because
Okay.
I remember one of the first pairs that I thought that went crazy was the Bape NMDs. And this was like 2016, the original Bape NMDs. There was a line around the Adidas store. The store employee told me that people are already camping out. I've told this story a couple of times, but I went around back and 30 or 40 of the resellers, a lot of them worked for the same person. So it's really different. It's like a different type of flex in Asia than it is in the States, where in the States, you know, you might grab your boys, I might grab Chris, I might grab Jason, let's go try to get as many pairs as we can. Here, it's like the resellers are big time. It's like, oh, let me send my factory workers, let me send my employees to go out and camp out in line. Let me send the grandma on the street, let me pay her $50 to camp out overnight. So shoes at that time, I want to say like 2015, 2016, it was really hard to get any shoes, like any hype stuff. It was just, yeah, impossible to get. And I think during COVID, the mind shifted around 2019. People couldn't go out, so there was lockdown. There was lockdown in place. So I think a lot of resellers obviously stopped going out, but I think a lot of people just shifted in terms of what makes money. It's almost like sneakers is too small game for them now. The average consumer going out to buy shoes, it's not worth it to make $50 or like 300 RMB, like that equivalent. It's like not worth it for them anymore. And I also want to attribute it to the middle class. Like in the States, I know a lot of resellers, they might be like high school kids, you know, young college kids who may not have that much money, and they're buying like 3 or 4 pairs and flipping for like $80. Like that to them is, oh, okay, this is how we get the ball rolling. In Asia, your resellers already have the big time money. They already have the big bucks. You don't have high school kids going out and spending 200, 210 on a pair of Jordans to hope to resell for 260. They just don't have that kind of extra money on them. So the difference between the higher class and then the middle class is a bigger gap here than it is in the States. So I think that has a lot to do with a lot of the resellers just kind of disappeared during COVID.
Did they disappear completely, or did they move on to reselling other things or something different?
The big time resellers, I think they definitely moved on to other things. Like they're just flipping watches now. They're flipping more luxury clothing, especially. Like you'll see people camped out for Goose Island drops, you know, just clothing. You know what I mean? It's selling.
The trend has shifted over there already.
Yeah, it's like shoes are not making enough money. It's not worth the time to make 50, $60. They're trying to flip a Rolex. They're trying to flip clothes that'll go for like thousands instead of hundreds.
Wow, I didn't even know clothes went for that much. That's crazy.
I think for me, one of the things is, especially since I came here, so I came here in 2018, I think something I noticed is that there's not too much hype around Jordan brand as there might be in the States. So if there's a drop in the States, I feel like there's a lot of buzz about it. People are talking about it. If there's a drop here, I might not hear about it until, or I won't see any advertisement for it until like a day before. I'll hear about it obviously from Instagram or something like that. You know, somebody will post something about one of the future releases. But I still remember when I first came out here, one of my grails was the Concord 11s. I always wanted a pair of those. I remember when they dropped, I didn't think I was going to get them. And I remember looking online and seeing that there was still a bunch of shoes in stock. And I remember going to my Jordan store in the mall nearby where I worked. And when I walked in, they still had a pair in my size, which is a size 9, as you guys know, goes really quick in the States. Like that's one of the fastest selling sizes. So that was something that was really surprising to me. But even just walking around, I don't see very many people wearing Jordan brand shoes. I see a lot of it on the basketball court with the performance models. I think in 2020, actually, Jordan brand reported that they had a huge jump in sales in China. But when you like look at like Jay's photos and kind of some of the trends, like a lot of those sales aren't actually coming from the retros. They're coming from the performance models. So the Jordan 36, the Jordan 35, those were a lot of big shoes that I saw out on the court that people were wearing. So that's just kind of an interesting trend. But I do think it's funny that we say like it's weird to see these shoes sitting on the wall, because I know, Chris, you talk about this a lot, but that's kind of how it should be. You should be able to walk into the store and look at a pair of Jordans and pick them off the wall and be able to check out with them. So I think that's just kind of such a weird thing that we're talking about it today, but that's kind of how the sneaker game should be.
I don't even know if I would classify it as should be. It's really how it used to be. Like that's just how I grew up, right? So it's like before getting an East Bay magazine or whatnot, and this is pre-internet, like back in the 90s and stuff. I remember going to an Athlete's Foot and to a Foot Locker or a Champs for the first time, and that's when I would see the Jordan for the first time. It was not a big old like thing, or every once in a while it was like a cool advertisement in the middle of one of the basketball games, one of the commercials that are now iconic. And outside of that, the first time that you experienced the shoe typically was either on someone else's foot that happened to have gotten them, or it was you trolling around in the store and stuff, and all of a sudden you're like, oh man, and you saw the new Jordan or the new Penny or whatever. That's just kind of like how it was. And back then, like depending on the store, you're able to try them on and see how they feel. And for someone like me, where I was more of a window shopper at the time, like it was pretty important because I didn't have access to things like Zoom Air or Air Max and stuff. I was in Payless shoes, so it was like my first experience in those types of things, and it really sparked a flame where I really wanted to like own something like that, you know. And so like that gave me something to like really work towards. And so I just think it's interesting that like today, for example, I was just going to the mall just to eat real quick just because it was convenient, but I happened to like just be noticing everybody, literally everybody, and this is not hyperbole, like almost everyone and their mom was wearing Jordan. There was this one dude, he was wearing a Jordan jersey, the pinstripe jersey with AJKOs and all that stuff, and I was just like, yo, this is like, what year is this? You know, like I was just like, this is crazy. I thought it was awesome. But yeah, so like everybody's wearing Jordans, man. Like kids that like my kid's age, like my teenager, she's a sophomore, and you know damn well they don't know much about Jordan outside of The Last Dance, and they're all wearing Jordan 1s. And I think it's great just because like our generation, like Jay and I's generation, and a little bit of yours, Jason, where we kind of like cultivated that into what it is now, right? Like unintentionally, like we grew up really fiending after these products. And it kind of like has grown through the next few generations where the parents of the person that like, oh, that person's mom and dad really wanted those shoes. And so now they're like able to buy them for not just themselves, but for their kids, almost like force feeding. Like they don't know no better. You know what I mean? So I think it's really interesting. However, to your point, when I walk by the Foot Locker, this Foot Locker is brand new, by the way. It's in Sacramento, Art of Fair Mall. It's a beautiful store. They combined all of the Foot Lockers together. So it's just like 4 shop lengths worth of retail space, and it's like the kids Foot Locker, the ladies section, men's basketball, Jordan, all that stuff, and it's crazy. And when you walk in there, it's this size, bro, and there's like 3 pairs of shoes on there, and it's the Jordan wall. And like it used to be like there was like the team shoes and the random stuff, the people that all the like sneakerheads will make fun of and things like that, like a Jumpman Pro or a Strong or whatever, and maybe a leftover retro or 2, and then the new game shoe, whatever number that is, a 30 something. Today, man, the wall is bare, bro, and it's not even from selling out. It's because like the shipments just aren't getting here. It's just like really, really crazy. What little shipments are coming for the retro products specifically are getting snatched up by bots or resellers, because everything, like you can't buy a pair of shoes off this app. There is no more walking into the mall and being like, oh, do you have my size? Yeah, cool. Can I try them on? Oh, yada, yada. You check out, boom, you're done. There is no more of that. It's like so weird. So Jay, I saw that you were reacting to that. Like, how do you feel? You know what I mean? Like with all of that.
So you touched on a couple of things, which is a perfect segue, because one, I want to go back to like our generation. Like growing up in elementary school, middle school, high school, I was in Taiwan. You know, I always kept up with what's happening in the States, and, you know, pre-internet days, you know, or during dial-up days, like the only way you got exposure to kicks was like watching the playoffs, right? I remember Iverson with the step over, and you're like, I have to get those, the answer fours with the zipper. Like I have to get those. I used to get East Bay sent to Taiwan, but it would take, first of all, because, you know, East Bay magazine used to just ship for free. Like the magazine you could get for free. So they would send it to Taiwan, which was like however long it took, 2 weeks, whatever.
They would mail that overseas.
Yeah,
cool.
They did. They totally did. And then I
did not know that.
I would go to my mom and I would say, oh my gosh, I got to get these. I still remember a very fond pair. It was the Adidas Superstars in basketball form, the SS2Gs, the shell toes. And I was like, I need these. I need some Jordans. And I was like, I got to get them for next basketball season because it was already too late for this season. It would take like 2 months for them to get there. So everything was like super delayed. I would get them and be like, yes, I finally got them. I'm like, what? The new Jordan's coming out already? No, what's going on? So like that just took me all the way back. I used to buy Slam Kicks just to look at what the new shoes were coming out. I loved doing that. That was like a whole process. I would go through that magazine from front to back. I would bring it to school because I was the only one in my group of friends that would have it ordered. So I would bring it to school and I would take orders from my friends too. I would ask them, be like, yo, do you guys want anything? Like, I'm going to make an order. And then it would just ship over. It was freaking awesome, man. But then speaking on when you said late shipments, Jason, that's another reason why I think shoes are sitting, because I think the brands are smart. They're realizing it's going to take however long because of logistics for shoes to get there. Like it could take 6 months, it could take a year, it could take a year and a half. And I think the brands right now, they don't want to risk shoes just sitting in containers and boats because that costs them money. So they're just reallocating their amounts to China. I mean, it's already made here either in China or in Vietnam. And they're like, you know what? Let's move the numbers around a little bit. Let's not have stuff go to North America, to Europe. Let's keep it in Asia. And I think because of that, because the numbers are so high now, they're not selling out. So I think that has a lot to do with it. In the States, that's why you're noticing all these like crazy restocks, right? Like all of a sudden it's like, wait, didn't the Watch the Thrones just restock? Like, didn't they just come out like a month ago? Why are they just restocking now? Or even worse, the black and white dunks. We call them pandas here, but the black and white dunks, they're like on the fourth or fifth restock now. It doesn't take an insider to kind of get it, but if you know shoes, you probably understand like, oh, it's probably because all these shoes are stuck somewhere and they're just slowly filtering in. But it's really messing it up because when shoes sit, and I know a lot of people don't agree with this, and I don't even agree with it, but it's just natural. Like when shoes are on shelf, it does something to the buyer where maybe they're just like, oh, I don't need these right now. I can wait a little bit. I can, let's see if they go on discount. And it's like a reverse psychology where people might feel like, oh, it's not hype. Yeah, the hype is dead with these. I don't need to try to flip them. I don't need to get them on release day. But when shoes are only coming in like 100 at a time or 200 at a time, people are just fiending for them. They're like, oh, we don't know when we're going to see these again. So instead of having like a 20,000 pair drop over a day, you're getting 100 over 6 months. I think that does a big difference to how people are buying shoes also.
I think that consumerism is at an all-time high. So it's like buy
Yep.
now before it like loses the consumer's consciousness. I think that a lot of that has to do with the internet, the Instagrams and the apps and things where things are here and then gone. Because back in the day, like there were still Nike outlets, but like those would be like leftover products, returns or whatever, like a defective pair. That's where B grades came from originally. Granted, there was less product also. I think that's another thing is that the ramp up of the amount of items being produced per quarter is so large that they have to take what's in the store that's not moving and shift it over to the factory store just to make sure that they can keep the revolving door revolving. But back when I was younger, seeing the Air Jordan 11, if it was on a shelf, it was not like I'm going to wait for this. It's like, oh, I can't afford this right now, but that I'm going to save my money up for that. You know what I mean? And so like that was kind of like what we were thinking back then versus now. It's like, I agree where a lot of consumers today, if they see something, you either have somebody that's truly into shoes and they grab it because they know that this is not like an everyday occurrence, or you have the person where it's like, I'm going to wait, like, oh, it's just sitting, it's not that popular. And that's not what a real brand would want. A real brand that is really after building a community of consumers want people to always want their product. What Nike has shifted over to, especially in recent years, is not that. They want you to buy without thinking. You know what I mean? And I think it's like really dangerous because what you're seeing right now, Jay, overseas, where the trends have shifted, your background is just kind of like what we wish we saw when we go to the mall. That is what it probably will end up at eventually, because there's going to be a trend shift in the US. It always happens, some sooner than later. I'm hoping that it happens soon because it's a big pain in the ass. Like for me personally, I'm only trying to get a pair so that I can just do my job. You know what I mean? So I can review shoes. I got to sit here and pay like $400 to $500 sometimes for a general release sneaker that it's not worth even half of what like they retail for quality wise, let alone what I'm having to pay for them just to get a video out.
Chris, you mentioned something that I think is actually really important to our next topic, which you mentioned, consumers in the US and kind of Nike and Jordan Brand's attitude is getting people to buy things without thinking. But something I noticed since I've gotten here, and Jay, you can probably attest to this, is the Chinese consumer has more options than the US consumer. And by that, I just mean access to different brands. So whether that's like Li-Ning, Anta, or Peak, they kind of have all these different brands that they can kind of choose from. And something I really noticed when I first got here, I think I bought a pair of Westbrook 2.0s, and that was just kind of my basketball shoe for a little bit. And a lot of my friends who were local, they were kind of like, well, why are you spending 1,500 RMB, which I think that's around $200 US? Why are you spending that much for a pair of shoes when you can spend 500, 600 RMB, which is less than 100 US dollars for a great pair of shoes? So there's been a rise in these Chinese brands, and they've kind of really been putting out really good product. They've been able to put out a lot of lifestyle shoes that have a lot of hype around them too, whether it's like Peak with their 3D printing, or, Li-Ning's become a really big fashion statement, not just here, but they've gone to the Paris fashion show, the New York fashion show. So next, let's kind of shift over to just kind of how maybe these Chinese brands have kind of taken a big step up and maybe how that's impacted some of the Western brands as well.
It's really interesting because the Chinese brands are definitely making a huge step up. Like anytime you watch a basketball game, it's really funny, Chris. Like I know you're a big Warriors fan, but anytime they have a Warriors game on and the broadcast, they always have Clay's shoe just sitting on the table. It's really funny. And I'm like, what is this random shoe placement doing here? That would be like if you're watching NBA on like TNT and then they just have like a pair of like Jordans sitting on the table, like out of nowhere.
They used to before the hype. Okay. So like 5 or 6 years ago, it used to be like that.
So they'll just have a pair of Clays like Antis K7 sitting on the table because, you know, Anta has such a big marketing share that, you know, they obviously pay for that. And yeah, Li Ning's making a huge push. They've really capitalized on Nike not doing well in China. I know we're not going to get too much into it, but the reason why Nike's not doing well and Jordan Brand's not doing well is it's like political reasons. So as Nike and Jordan was going down, Li Ning was like, come to us. We're not saying anything where you've always known about our principles and our manufacturing. I know for a fact that Nike lost like a big percent of their influencers, KOLs, and they all jumped ship over to Li Ning. And it was like overnight. It was very swift. A lot of the people here were targeting their anger towards these KOLs, like, how could you support these big brands? Why aren't you supporting local? And so it was like overnight, like Li Ning went from number 6, number 5, number 4 to like number 2, number 1. And Jason's right. Like a lot of their shoes are really high quality. Like I had never actually played in Li Ning basketball. I mean, I like to stick with what I know. I wear a lot of Kobe 5s, Kobe 6s, Kobe 8s. I've always been like a big Nike basketball supporter. And then I actually got my first pair of Sonic 9s, the Li Ning Sonic 9s. And I was like, yo, these are super comfortable. Like, I don't know why. I just didn't want to spend my money on something I didn't know. And it wasn't even a lot, you know, it was like Jason said, it was like $100. And I bought them and I was like really pleasantly surprised with how much tech they put into it, the different colorways. And then now Li Ning stores have like totally rebranded. You go in now and it's almost like walking into a house of hoops. It's like they have their basketball section in the back, they have their athletic performance stuff in the front, they have their lifestyle stuff throughout the store. They even have just lifestyle stores. Like they don't even sell athletic shoes. It's just their high fashion stuff, you know. But yeah, they've definitely made a huge push, and you know, credit to them to capitalize, kind of like kick your opponent when they're down a little bit. But they've definitely gained a huge market share, which is funny because they're in China, but they've definitely gained a lot of their following back.
They've definitely become more of a luxury brand, at least, you know, since I've gotten here. I still remember coming to China, I think maybe 6-7 years ago. And that was when the Way of Wade 5s had just released. And I still remember going into a Li Ning flagship store, and it wasn't really like the experience like it is today, like Jay was mentioning. Like it was kind of just, you had the wall, you had the products, maybe you had like a few basketballs, but it was just really simple. And I think now when you walk in there, it's just this experience. And when you walk in, you know, the shoes, even the prices have gone up a little bit in terms of the performance models and some of their fashion wear as well. But you can just kind of really tell that there's been that big shift. And I see a lot more people wearing Li Ning products than I do Nike or Jordan or even Adidas. So that's been just kind of a huge shift that I've just kind of noticed on my end.
Here in the States, Chinese branded shoes, like not to sound like mean or anything, but just like the thought of China, even though this is where all these shoes are made out of, but like the typical Americans, like, oh, they're knockoffs or whatever, you know what I mean?
Right.
Low quality. It's really like a weird way that they think, because like, it's like, where do you think everything's coming from? Like it literally says it. So it's like, how can you say like that Nike is like the best when it's made in the same place that you're dogging? But that's a different issue for a different day of discussion and stuff, because the American consumer is like, they'll convince themselves of anything. The thing is though, is that like I never seen Chinese shoes up until I started really reviewing footwear. And then that's what I really like kind of like opened up to, like, oh, there's other options outside of Nike, Jordan, Adidas. I was pretty much the first one, not in the US, but just like on this platform, the YouTube platform, to review a Li Ning shoe. That was my first. I think it was like the Turning Point and the Villain. Those were like the two models. And then from there, like I remember liking one and not liking the other too much. That was where I was like, oh, these are actually like pretty good shoes and stuff. I think it was Evan Turner was wearing them. Baron Davis was wearing them. They tried to come into the US a little bit. They sat on Champ shelves until they were discounted to $19.99, and they still weren't moving. The BD Dooms, which was like Baron Davis's shoe when he was with the Warriors and stuff. And they got a couple of people like Rondo. Before all that, they even got like Kevin Garnett, even though like he's known in the NBA as like the sneaker brand whore or whatever. Like he's went from like Nike to And1 to, you know what I mean, to Adidas and stuff. Like he'll go wherever you pay him and stuff. So it's like he doesn't really care. So, you know, like they started getting some big names here or there. We reviewed the Rondos way back when, and I remember them being like decent shoes, but nothing to like really like fancy over. And then out of nowhere, man, when they signed Clay, his first shoe was decent, but it was very much kind of like a couple years behind whatever Nike was doing. But then from the Clay 2 onward, it was like, wow, there's like a really big shift here. I don't know if it's because they're seeing the designs before anybody else, because a lot of the manufacturing is done over there. So they're able to kind of get like a first look as far as like the way that things are knitted or loomed, or tech advancements in foam manufacturing, rubber compounds, who knows what it is, you know what I mean? But they started really like pushing forward with this championship caliber athlete. They couldn't just put out the same stuff that they were putting out. Because I remember a long time ago, we would review Leaning was the popular one based off of what we were getting as far as comments go. And they were like, yeah, like Leaning is basically like China's Jordan or Nike and stuff back then. And then Anta was their version of like a Shaq shoe over at Walmart. And that's just what I was told. And so since then, though, they're no longer the Shaq shoe. Like in my opinion, if we were going to just kind of like quickly rank, I guess you could throw Peak in there, even though Peak basketball is like a hit or miss. But if you were going to rank like Anta, Leaning, and Peak, in my opinion, based off of performance, Anta's really killing it right now. Like they kind of have it on lock. It's just very interesting to see Chinese brands really bring it. Like they're not even playing. Like Jason, you know, you played in the KT6s, and I think you started in the KT7s. The tech that they've got in just those two shoes alone really blows anything that any other brand anywhere is doing. And it's really quite interesting. The downside is that the consumer in the US is so blinded by flashy marketing and false hype that like they're not even looking at that. So when I go to my gym, I think I've ran into like 2 people, maybe 3 max, and I've been here for 5 years. That's it. Literally, that's it. I've seen more Under Armours, and even then, that's rare. Right now, I'm seeing a lot of Puma products because of LaMelo and stuff. But even that first shoe, I can't remember what they were called, the Clyde somethings. There was the really bright orange one,
right?
With the yellow form strip. Yeah, that one
with the hard midsole. That
shoe here, because of that color, really popped. And so like it's like really interesting the way that things work and stuff. When I was at Puma's headquarters recently, they had a showroom kind of like what you see behind me, where half the wall was US product and half the wall was overseas product. And the overseas product, I'm not actually sure if I'm supposed to say this, but I'm going to say it anyways. But the overseas product was super high quality stuff. Yeah. I'm talking about like great colorways, great materials. Everything was top notch, fantastic. Like it really on anything that you see Nike or Jordan brand putting out in the States. Then the US side of the wall was wacky ass colors like fluorescence and stuff like all stuff that I just really don't like. The quality was subpar, and they all know this, but they were just like, but they don't want this. Like the US customers don't want this. The overseas customers won't buy this crap. The US customers will. The overseas customer will literally walk past it unless it's this type of quality, this type of leather, suede, clean neutral tones and stuff like that. It was a really weird, like if you looked at the 2 walls, it looked like a kid drew on shoes over here, and over here was like fashionable stuff. So yeah, so just the parallels between the consumers is just really what's kind of driving things. And I don't honestly know if US consumers are going to ever really wake up, just because like this is the way America works, man. Like consumerism is just kind of how it is. Marketing is everything. Like it doesn't have to be quality, it's got to be flashy. And so it's really disappointing from someone like me, where I try my best to give everything a chance. And it is really surprising to see stuff from a brand in 6-7 years. This is their 7th shoe, the Clay shoe. If you were to match that first one up to the 7th one, like there's no, like you'd almost think that like the first shoe was from the 60s or something. Like that's how low tech it is compared to their new stuff. So it's really interesting the way that things are working. But the consumer mind frame here versus where you guys are is totally different, man. It's just a trip. And it's so interesting that like you guys are living over there and you're both from here. So like you have experienced the whole thing like full circle.
Well, I mean, so like Chris, what you were saying is the tech is catching up. What I think is super interesting, and I know you mentioned this a lot, it's like one of like the biggest go-to things, is that like the price keeps going up, but the quality isn't getting better. How is that making any sense, right? You have
making Jordan brand lots of sense.
I'm looking at all these basketball shoes, right? I look at maybe not KD because I know that that's like a model that you really like, and I know the new KDs are actually really good court performers. I'm looking at like maybe Kyrie's, maybe PG's, maybe like Giannis's new shoe, for example. Like you're not giving us what we know you have. You know what makes a really good basketball shoe, like full length zoom air or 4-foot zoom and heel zoom. PG's line, it's always like, oh, actually, you've decided to go with a whole new cushion. You took out all the zoom, or you only give it to a heel zoom, no 4-foot zoom. It's like, as consumers, we want that, and we are willing to pay for it. If it's worth the tech and the comfort, and we know that you're putting in the best stuff, people will pay 150. People will pay 180. I mean, LeBrons are like 180 now, 200, pushing 200, maybe even.
They're 200 here in the States.
And then I look at that versus, okay, my Sonic 9s. They were under $100. They may not have like the top tier stuff, but they have your new cushion. They have your new lockdown system, all these new uppers and new materials, breathable materials, more cushion padding, pillows inside the ankle collar. You can't tell me that you can't do it. So I think the difference is, for me, I'm like, I'm getting way more bang for my buck. $100 and I get all this stuff versus 180, and you're actually taking things away. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. And I know you complain and you talk about that all the time.
Well, so I think that that's where their factory stores, especially here in the US, really can hurt the entry of any new brands. Say you put the KT7 on the shelf and it's next to the LeBron that's 200, and the KT is listed at like, let's just say 130. Bang for your buck wise, the KT7 is greater than what the LeBron can offer you. However, in 4 months, you might see that LeBron at the factory store for 40% off. And so then the American consumer is like, why am I going to try this when I can just wait for this to go to that price? Here, it's all about brands. And so it's less about performance and more about what that logo is going to do for you and stuff. And it's really frustrating, especially knowing what Nike can do. Like if you're going to take all of their product line just from the performance stuff, we're not even talking about sportswear or retro or any of that crap. They got it so right with this GT lineup where there's 3 shoes for 3 styles of players. Even though I don't personally love the GT run, it's a good setup, and there's a bunch of people that do like it, but that GT cut is amazing. That GT jump is amazing, even though that's way too much for me, but like such a weird shoe where I'm just kind of like, okay, so you in 3 models, you've already made it to where I'm like, oh, there's no reason for your Kyrie, even though it's a great shoe. There's no reason for the LeBron. There's no reason for the Giannis. There's no reason for the KD. And most of those are good shoes. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, why do you do this when you know that you can funnel things? You know what I'm saying? But that's where I think like Nike doesn't care. Nike's not just trying to get your dollar. They're trying to make sure that you don't see anybody else either. So they got all of these models on the shelf. They own the shelf space. The Adidas is over there on the bottom shelf. Like I'm not even playing. Like it's literally like over there on the bottom shelf, like the new T-Max on the bottom floor. I was just like, bro, those just came out. Why are they not on the middle at least? Like, and they're just like, oh, that's where they tell me to put them. So I'm just like, all right. So it's just like a really weird thing, but you know, Nike can do it. They choose not to because they don't have to. And that's where the competition thing will come in. I've been saying this on this channel for freaking 12 years. Competition in the sneaker realm or just in any business where consumerism is a thing is great for the consumer. You've got to push your competitors to outdo you. And right now it's very difficult for these other brands to do that because Nike's just so much at the forefront of everybody's mind where it's like, if it doesn't have a swoosh on it, I don't want it. Whether it's a brick or not, they don't even care. So I'm glad to know that people overseas are like, nah, man, it's like function first and then everything else later. And then when you do filter in the whole, oh, it's worth money, these GT cuts, like why the are they $300 and more?
Why are they so limited? You made such a great shoe. My friends in Asia, they can't even get them. Like they were on shelf. The first colorway is kind of white and pink. Like they were here.
Yeah.
Now they're gone.
So that
what
shoe
is
gone
going
even
on
where you're at, because even here,
oh, it's gone.
I just got a pair because it like restocked on the .com side. I really don't know what's going on. I thought really that they were overseas, just on the shelf, and so maybe you guys were the one flipping them over here to the U.S. people, but I guess they're just gone everywhere.
I was just gonna say Nike definitely needs something that isn't a signature model that is a great performer. Like for me, I always loved that Hyperdunk line. That was something that I got every year. Eventually, they kind of started to drop off a little bit, and that's kind of when I started to look at other shoes and things like that. But I just remember that being a killer. You could count on that being a great shoe. It was a high top, but it performed kind of like a low top. It never was too stiff. Something that like I just wanted to touch on too, because we've talked a little bit about like the consumer mindset, but something I love about Chinese companies, and this is all Chinese companies, is that they're aggressive. They're not scared to take risks, and they're willing to make investments. And I think the earliest example of that was with Ling signing D Wade when he came out of that deal with Jordan Brand, because he was just kind of that perfect guy to kind of make that first push. And Anta slowly caught up, but for a while, Ling was kind of that brand where when you talked about China, it was all about Ling. And that's because D Wade was just kind of that perfect first guy. I mean, he's always really great about promoting stuff on social media. He's a great player. So he's somebody where if he's wearing these shoes, you think to yourself, okay, like they got to be decent. There's got to be a reason why he went there. And it's been really cool to kind of see the involvement of just kind of the Wade line in general. Now they kind of, the all city models are performing really well. Signature models are performing really well. So that's been really cool to see. But the other thing too, like in addition to that, is Chinese companies listen to what the consumers say. And Chris, you've touched on this a lot, is that Jordan Brand's not really great at taking constructive criticism. They're kind of like, we're the top dog. If you don't like my shoe, that's too bad. I put out a great product. You're supposed to like it. You're supposed to buy it. But for example, with the KT6 and the KT7, there was a huge jump in performance because with the KT6, they introduced all this new tech. Traction was different than all the previous models. They had that giant carbon fiber plate, but they were so stiff. I thought that they were great in certain aspects, but I just could not play in them at all. I think I put it in the review that they just weren't quite there. They were putting a lot of stuff out, but they just had a lot to improve on. And then the KT7 came out and it was like, these are money. I don't know if they actually looked at what the consumers were saying, but they made that right tweak with the shoe. And so that's just always kind of cool to see, because I think that they're really involved with their community. And so they're willing to make those changes and be like, okay, like that's something that we didn't do too great. How can we improve on it? So you just kind of really see that reflected in the products. And, that KT7 review is coming out, but that was my favorite shoe for a while. Like I'd go back to it. Like I'm testing the AG2 now. And some days when I'm just not feeling the toe box, I'll switch to the KT7, or now I'm playing in the all city 10s too. But that's just something really cool to see, is somebody willing to listen and make those changes.
That's part of their like aggressiveness though. They really take that competition seriously, whereas in the US there isn't much. And so Jordan Brand has the luxury of being like, we're not going to listen to you or whatever. We're going to do what we want and all of that stuff. And sometimes it works out for them. Sometimes it doesn't. Not everything that any of these brands is ever perfect, but not all of it is all bad either. But the arrogance that you see from like here in the States from Nike and Jordan is like insane. To Jay's point also, the inconsistency that we are seeing right now within lines, where the Kobe was something and the Hyperdunk 2 were models that were super consistent all the way through. Like you knew what you were getting each year, and they were trying to one up themselves on top of that by still utilizing the same tech but improving it, not by changing things completely. So like the Giannis 1 and the Giannis 2 are like two literally different shoes. And then from the 3, it's like whose shoe is this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, it doesn't make any sense. And so you have that. And then same thing with the Kyries. The Kyries, though, is a good example of what happens here, which is like they're less focused right now on performance, and they're more focused on money. So it's like the budget is things up. So the Kyrie 1 had a very small budget to work with, and you can tell it had practically no tech in it. The upper was made out of the cheapest stuff that you could find, all of that skin fuse and heat weld stuff, things that didn't take a lot of hands to manufacture it. And then when you see the sales numbers, every Kyrie model has really outsold a LeBron or a Jordan or whatever as far as performance shoes go. And I'm not talking about the retros, I'm talking about like the Air Jordan. Now when you go to what is now known as the Kyrie 8 or the Kyrie Infinity, that shoe, I'm kind of like, why did you wait 8 models to put real tech in here? Like, oh, now they have the budget. It took all of that time to really like earn their keep, essentially, like to show what's happening. And then if you look at the PG line, they're losing their budget left and right on that shoe, man. I saw that shoe and I I didn't even think it was real, to be honest. Second off, I thought it was the one that they put in the famous footwears, the budget shoes, like the
It
fly
doesn't
straps
look like a
and things like that.
basketball shoe anymore.
It looks like the Renew shoes, I don't know what they're doing, but like essentially their budget was stripped from the shoe and that's all they had to work with. At that point, why continue the line? Especially for a brand that likes to promote this sustainability thing. Like that's not sustainable. Like you're creating the problem that you're now trying to fix. They kept things the way that they used to, where it was 3 top tier athletes. It was KD, LeBron, Kobe. And then they added Kyrie and a couple other guys. But like you got to learn when that new school was here and like start to cut the old school and stuff, because they still really give, granted they signed him into a really big contract, but they gave LeBron everything and his shoe doesn't move the way that Kyrie's shoes move. It just doesn't. If they would cut their line even by half, it would make I think a whirlwind of a difference. But then like I was saying, you wouldn't see anything. You would see different stuff on the shelf and they don't want that. All you see is swooshes, and that matters to them.
That blew my mind when they couldn't come up for that deal with Vanessa Bryant, because the Kobe line to me has always been a really strong staple. There were a few of those, like AD models that were a little weird, but when it came to like the actual line, they were great performers. And I think we'll see
them re-up. We still see new PEs every day, so they're still making these shoes. So I think that we'll see something happen eventually. I think that Vanessa was holding her ground.
I could see them kind of coming in with a little bit of a low ball,
But they lowballed the shit out of her, dude.
But that's something else too, is that like when we talk about like Nike, they have all the top guys, right? They have Giannis, they have Kyrie, they have LeBron. These are all like faces of the NBA. Under Armour hit it big with Curry. I mean, we all know that story of, that Nike meeting and whatnot. But that's what's been really cool about these Chinese brands too, though, is that they're working with guys who aren't the top. You can argue that Clay's top 75 or, that was a little bit of controversy. He is to me as well. But they work with guys like Gordon Hayward, Lou Williams, and like they're guys who you just don't think about when you think NBA. You think of those big faces like LeBron and Giannis. So it's been really cool to see them be successful, even though they're working with guys who aren't necessarily the most well-known. So like that really speaks to their tech and just kind of what the companies have been able to do. So that's just been something cool for me, because you would have never thought 10 years ago that Lou Williams would have his own signature line, or 361 just signed Spencer Dinwiddie. They're working with guys who just don't have that market power, but because of their tech, they kind of speak for themselves. The shoe kind of does its own work. So I think that that's just something really cool.
I mean, you only have 10, 15 faces of the NBA. If you think about what they're doing, they're smart, because they're going to target like the CJ McCollums, you know what I mean? Who are like the top 50, the top 100. And if they get enough of those guys, they're going to slowly seep their way in. You know what I mean? In the locker room, you don't think people are noticing what CJ's wearing? You know what I mean? If they get enough of those guys and they sign these small deals and they sign like these contracts with them, you'll have a lot more of these Chinese brands in the locker room sooner than later, I feel like.
I think Kevin Looney wears Antas now too, because I think he saw Clay wearing his Anta models. So like they've kind of signed a few. I think James Wiseman's an Anta athlete as well now. So they've kind of signed a few guys. Yeah. They signed him, but I think because he's been hurt, we haven't really been noticing what he's wearing. But I heard from somebody that they signed him, but they're just kind of working out the details now and trying to figure that out. But there's just that connection too. Like you were mentioning in the locker room, they're like, what are you wearing? Like they're curious about it, because Ling Ning did that too with Jimmy Butler and the Heat. That's no coincidence that Jimmy goes to the Heat and all of a sudden you see him wearing Ling Ning now. So
it's smart also because, like I said, you got to start recognizing when these current players are reaching their peak and moving out of their massive amounts of fame. And there are newcomers coming up, and every once in a while you're going to sign enough of them where you're going to find the next Steph, or you're going to find the next James Harden or whatever. They're not going to all be Gordon Haywards, you know what I mean? And no offense to Hayward, because he looked like he was on that up and up until he got hurt. You know what I mean? Right. So, and that took him a long time to get to that point. So I think that signing with an underdog is really cool, because if you think about it, none of these guys are truly underdog. They're NBA players. They are the top tier athlete of the world. One of these guys is going to hit, and they're going to be wearing, just like what happened with Clay. Clay was a Nike athlete. He was a bottom level Nike athlete, just like Steph was. Anta came in, they gave him a decent deal to start, and they gave him a shoe right away. And he was like, yeah, sure, whatever, you know what I mean? And then boom, all of a sudden he's a champion, like literally that year. And so like everybody was like, oh crap, like we were not ready for this. And so they really had to ramp things up and everything. So it's been really cool to see, like I said, the competition just opening up. I think that this is so needed for footwear. As long as you stay off the comment section of things and you just really like focus on like what you like as an individual, then you're going to really find that there's so much cool out there, and it usually doesn't have a swoosh on it.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about, shameless plug for you here, Chris. That's the cool thing about WearTesters for me, is just you guys are pretty unbiased when it comes to looking at brands and looking at performance. Because, sometimes you watch reviews or some of the other guys and you can tell that there's a little bit of bias.
They're dancing. They're dancing around the topics a little bit.
And they don't really give these brands a chance. And maybe it's because they don't really know of these brands, or, even the consumers themselves. They influence the shoes that you guys review, or like that we review. So, but that's something cool. I think that you guys always do a really good job at looking at shoes that the typical person wouldn't think about.
Like it really depends. So like the reviewer that might not know what they're doing, maybe they're just generally curious. So maybe that's their entry point. So hopefully eventually they learn more about like what they're talking about in general. Cause like if they're like that with a Chinese shoe, they're probably like that with a Nike, right? But what Jay was saying earlier in the conversation was about the influencer stuff. Those people are much like these pro athletes, where they're going to wear whatever you pay them to. So a lot of these guys here in the States, especially, that are considered influencers and stuff, they don't care about anything other than you cutting that check and you sending them free stuff. As long as you continue to do that, they're going to continue to be like, yo, this is hot, this is fire, this is whatever, hashtag Puma Life, or hashtag Anto, or hashtag whatever.
Puma Life for 3 months.
whatever the check is for, you know what I mean? But we don't get paychecks for that. Like I buy all this stuff, you know what I'm saying? So like it's a little bit different. Like at the end of the day, I'm still the consumer. I'm just letting other consumers know that don't have access to these things what their money could buy them if they're interested. And so I'm still biased in a way where it's like I have my preferences. Sometimes that's with a Chinese brand, sometimes it's with Under Armour, sometimes it's with Puma, sometimes it's with Jordan. And I clearly love the things that I grew up wanting. And so like there's obviously bias towards that, and maybe I'm harsher on them for things because I hold them on such a high pedestal. Granted, they do it themselves, like they put themselves on that pedestal. So it's like, well, if you're gonna claim this, like at least stick to your own standards. I do my best to keep everything as neutral as possible while still letting everybody know, like, hey, the Jordan 3 is one of my favorite shoes, it's no secret, or the Reebok Question is one of my favorite shoes, no secret. But I still love what Anta does or what Peak does. 361 I forgot about. 361 is like, if you guys knew what 361 was back when Kevin Love was wearing them, like you would have like laughed, you know what I mean? Like you'd have been like, wow, this is a shoe? It's like, yeah, it is. But like, I don't know what happened, man. They must have like went underground and put a lot of money into their product development, because like the new stuff, I was like blown away by it. I was like, holy shit, this is insane. Yeah. So so it's just really interesting. But we have gone we've gone a little bit longer than we anticipated, so we will cut this short. But if you guys like this type of topics and conversation, let us know down below in the comment section so that we can do this again, whether it's with the three of us or maybe interchange people. Let Jason know how he did. Go follow Jay on Instagram at Shanghai. So we'll also have everybody's stuff in the comments and everything too. We'll like pin a comment with everybody's information. Any last words, Jason?
Not much. I just hope like today was just kind of a good way to give people some insight. I know people that follow Kicks on Fire or some of these bigger Instagram pages, they've probably seen Jay's photos and been like, what's going on in China? So I think it was just a good way to kind of open their eyes to that, but also just kind of, we talked a little bit about the brands too. So hopefully people walk away with this conversation with a more open mind. Hopefully they're more willing to try some things out. And appreciate you guys both for hopping on. Jay, I know you got a basketball game later, so appreciate you for being able to fit us into your schedule. But it was just great being able to chop it up with you guys, and I think that we had a lot of great conversation, and definitely something we should look at doing again, whether like you said, Chris, it's with somebody else, interchange people, or we'll kind of see where to go from here. But definitely a lot of fun.
Definitely. What's your cat's name, by the way?
Oh, my cat's name's Tilly. Yeah, she made a few little guest appearances here and there, so
I was trying so hard not to laugh. Anyways, Jay, go for it.
I want to start off first with Chris. Thanks for taking the time, man. I know this isn't like your regular type of segment that you do. And I know it's been a while since you've done sort of like a webcam kind of conversation talk. I remember it's like, this is how long I've been following you on YouTube, man, is that you used to do like even like Marvel movie reviews. I remember you did like those a couple of times. And I was just like,
we've done lots of different things. Time is not abundant anymore, so I can't do everything.
Yeah, man, I've been following you for a long time. You know, every time you do your reviews, it's like a trip down memory lane, right? Because like the things that you talk about and the things that you kind of wish were happening right now is like everything that I think about with sneakers. You know, just bringing back the retros. I remember the Kobe Elites. I remember KD Elites. I remember those used to come out right before playoff time. I used to get super hyped for them. It was like the heightened version of what they were wearing all season. I remember they would only get like 3 or 4 colorways a year, and then the Elites would come out, and it was like that was the perfect arc for shoes. I felt like the what those would come out at the end of the line and would mash all the colors together. And I remember I was so pissed when LeBron, I don't know what number it was anymore, but the what the came out as like the second colorway.
Yeah.
What?
I remember that.
Like, how did that happen? Like, this is supposed to come out at the end of the line. That makes sense. Like, how are you going to give me the what the colorway as the second drop? Like, I don't even know what's coming out later. Those kind of questions I'm always thinking about when you're doing your reviews and the things that you kind of hit on. So I really appreciate that. Jason, you were in Taiwan before too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the whole Taiwan, China connection. Anytime you're in Shanghai, man, you got to let me know. Oh, there's Tilly. Anytime you're in Shanghai, anytime you're in Shanghai, let me know, man. We'll go sneaker shopping. We'll like vlog or something. We'll send it to Chris so he can be jealous about what we got out here.
Yo, for real. Thank you guys both for the time. Jason, this is all you, so thank you for coming up with everything. I think that this is really cool. I think it's fun. I don't know if everybody else is gonna tune in, but we're really a channel for real sneakerheads, not like hype beasts and stuff. So I'm sure that everybody that's watching is actually like into what we're talking about, because it's also their passion, which is what I can only speak about what I know, like what I remember and what my likes are and stuff. And hopefully that translates into something fun for most people. And I appreciate everybody for tuning in, especially for being longtime viewers and stuff like that. Eternally grateful, because without you guys, we're not able to, 12 years strong on this platform. So that's pretty cool. But thank you so much for everybody tuning in and being here. Sound off below in the comment section if you like this, and hopefully we can do it again. So thank you once again for everything. And until next time, guys, have a good one.